My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
This episode is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Didn't file with TurboTax last year? That's in the past. Now, Taxes is getting the TurboTax app and filing your own taxes for free if you didn't file with them last year. File by February 18th. All tax forms, all 100% free. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. New filers and filers who didn't use TurboTax last year only must start and file your own taxes in-app by February 18th. Excludes TurboTax Live. Full terms at turbotax.com.
When it comes to towing, seeing is believing. That's why Chevy Truck's advanced camera technology offers up to 8 available cameras for 14 unique views, so you can focus on the view that really matters. Chevrolet, together let's drive. Learn more about Chevy Trucks at Chevy.com. Safety or driver assistance features are no substitute for the driver's responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner. Read the vehicle owner's manual for important feature limitations and information.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Hey, Chicago. What do you say? Cubs gonna win today.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise Podcast. It's time for the baseball podcast with national baseball writer David Brown. David, how are you?
Andy. Hi, Andy. Sorry, I jumped you. I'm great.
We're excited. I like it.
I wouldn't go that far. No.
The trade deadline is a mere 5 days away and like 3 hours at the time we're recording this.
How many minutes?
2 hours, 51 minutes.
All right. Remember, some things could come in after the deadline.
That's right.
Not after the deadline, but after the time.
Yeah. If you get your fax in time, are they still doing that? Are they still faxing things over to headquarters?
It's the safest way. It's encrypted or something.
Yeah. See, the Cubs have a big trade, and Carter's like, "There's no paper in the machine." It's like we don't need paper to send out, Carter. What? We've been over this. Didn't you take a fax class at Vanderbilt? Speaking of the Cubs for just a second, Jed Hoyer has a tradition, I think, it's a good one, of the first game of every homestand. He goes down, sits in the dugout a few hours before the game, and he lets the gaggle of Cub reporters come and scream nasty questions at him. And he did it the day after the trade deadline, or day after the All-Star break ended, because the Cubs were starting a homestand. And he basically made the announcement that they were not going to, wouldn't be renting players this year. They wouldn't be acquiring anybody whose contract was up at the end of the year in a futile attempt to do something in the playoffs and even make them.
Right.
But that they would be open to trades that would help them beyond this year, which all made perfect sense. What didn't make perfect sense was he talked about how they have to be careful trading from their prospects because he feels like they still are in an excellent position going forward. And everybody kind of went, what do you mean still? Don't you? You have, since you took over as GM, there's nary a playoff appearance. There's one winning season. Your collective 35 games under. You've been in first place for, I believe, 34 days in 4 seasons. Never later than June 2nd. The vaunted farm system of the Cubs does have, I think the Keith Law has a top 60 out, I think, and he's got 5 Cubs on it. But they're all 35 or lower. And the biggest problem with their team is they don't have any like impact players. And usually when your top farm system guys are not in the top 10 or 20, they're not projected to be impact guys either. And we talked about it a few weeks ago where I got frustrated with Jed because he was talking about earlier about how they had to be careful not to trade prospects because they didn't want to repeat the mistakes they made when they were in their World Series run, where they traded away all these good young players. And then I looked and there weren't any good young players that they actually traded away. And so I feel like he's learned a lesson that incorrectly, maybe 2 different ones now. And I don't know how much of it is Jed really being that dumb or how much of it is, I got to say something. So I'm just going to say this.
I think he must be having like old memory flashbacks of like when Gleyber Torres was, not bad. I think that's what he means. Like at some point in 2019, after a series against the Orioles, when Gleyber went crazy.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, I wish we had that guy. And I think that's what he means.
Yeah, he only remembers Gleyber hitting 14 home runs against the Orioles one year, and Eloy hitting a home run in like the first 4 series against the Cubs that he played with as a White Sox. Maybe we should get him. Do you think maybe he doesn't know the Wi-Fi password, and he hasn't been able to like log on and look at what anybody's up to like currently?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Dylan Cease, although not having a great year this year, I can see how they kind of missed him.
Yep.
But nothing happened there that I would classify as a mistake.
No, the big trade they made worked, and they won a World Series.
And why would you want to have it so like all the players that you traded turned out to be bad?
Yeah, we talked about that too, about how you actually do need some of your prospects to flourish after you trade them to keep your current prospects marketable.
Lets people know that you can produce them.
So they're in a weird position where what they drastically need is offense. They haven't scored. There's Jay Kudep had a thing on his, he does the thing where he puts all the logos and circles them, and then he's got everybody circled except for the Cubs and the White Sox, and it says your team has scored 10 or more runs since the All-Star break.
Right.
And it's really hard for the Cubs to improve their offense in a trade because they basically right and left field are locked in for good. Shortstop is locked in for good. If they add a body, and most likely move Christopher Morel to DH, so then there's just not a lot they can do, and they can't even move most of those guys. It's the Ian Happ no trade thing. Just it annoys me more and more every day, especially when I was thinking about this today. So since June 2nd, he is hitting .260 with a .367 on base and a .540 slugging, 10 homers, 36 RBIs.
My fantasy team is well aware.
He would be, if you could trade him, he would be a very attractive trade piece right now. And it would help you then because supposedly you have all these, you've got Owen Casey and Kevin Alcantara and these other guys coming up, and you could clear out left field, get good players back for Happ. Everybody's happy. But you gave him a no trade and you can't trade him. And knowing Ian, the way Cub fans know him, he's not a guy that if you go to him and try to convince him to go, he's not going to want to. He's comfortable with the Cubs, and he's the kind of guy who I think has to be comfortable to play well.
Right.
Like he's been very open about. He's had issues with anxiety and other things, and he's had to learn. That's why he stares at the magic dots in his helmet and stuff before it bats. He's like the last guy on the team that you could go to and be like, all right, we got this deal worked out. How'd you like to be a Dodger? And he's like, nah.
Los Angeles?
Nah.
It's so big.
I like it here. I don't have to go, so I'm not going to go. So I don't know what they do. The one there were two rumors came out last weekend. One that the Cubs are in active talks with the Red Sox and Yankees about Jameson Taillon. The other was that they would be open to trading Justin Steele for the right package. I don't think anybody believes the Steele one.
Yeah.
The
Steele dossier?
Yes. Yeah. Hopefully is there I wonder, is there a PP tape and that's why Justin, they're trying to trade him. For me, I just think it's funny. It's like, well, if you trade him, then you'd have to go find a replacement for him in the offseason.
Yeah.
Good luck doing that. But also, he's like the one example they have of actually being able to draft and develop a pitcher, a starting pitcher. And I think they would be completely loath to ship that away.
So you would then have kind of an extra sentimental attachment to a prospect. It wouldn't be Jed so much, but it would be you.
I'd trade him tomorrow if I had a chance.
Oh,
he's a pitcher. They get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
He's good. He's worth a lot. If you could get a good offensive piece for him, I'd do it. But I just can't imagine they would. The Taillon thing is also interesting to me. I'm all for that. I've never been a big Jameson Taillon fan. But he is of course he has a partial no trade. He has 10 teams that he can say he doesn't want to go to. I don't know if it's, I would guess, right? Usually with those, they have to, like the beginning of the year, they have to submit. There's a deadline. There's some kind of
when they sign the contract, right? Isn't it?
Well, it's worded weird on Cott's.
Okay.
It sounds like he can change it every year.
That's new. I like that from
that makes sense
standpoint.
because how are you supposed to, project 4 years out what teams you don't want to go to? But we know how that works. I mean, a lot of times a good agent will put teams on there that he actually wouldn't mind going to, who would be in demand, who he'd be in demand for, so that when Jed comes to them, they can they can get a few more bucks out to say yes. But Taillon is signed for next year and the year after at $18 million each year. And it's pretty good value for him. And if you're the Cubs, if you trade him, then you've got to go find somebody to replace him next year,
right?
Who's almost certain to cost you more than $18 million.
New money.
But I guess the thought is, with 2 years of control, beyond this, the prospect haul you get might be higher than you would think for a guy of his ability. Mm-hmm. Like he's got value this year and the next couple of seasons, so maybe they could get something back. I was trying to think of he did pitch for the Yankees a couple of years ago. He pitched pretty well there his second year. They were so enamored with him that they let him sign with the Cubs. The Red Sox have Craig Breslow as their president of baseball, whatever, and he was the pitch lab guru for the Cubs, so he knows Taillon. But I'm like everybody else. They should trade him the Orioles because the Orioles have all those prospects. So how about, do you think 3 years of Jameson Taillon could get you Kobe Mayonnaise to play third base for you?
I don't know about Kobe Mayonnaise. I think it could maybe get you Connor Norby. Maybe Connor Norby. He's a couple pegs down from Kobe Mayo.
Okay.
And it also depends on, what's the market for the other Oriole potential. The Jack Flaherty. I joke about Jack Flaherty going back to the Orioles again at the deadline, but apparently it's possible.
Yeah.
He's pitching very well now, though. So you'd rather have him than Taillon, although that's just for this season.
Yeah.
I think that's the Orioles. They're just going to have to eventually deal with. You talk about Jed falling in love with prospects. They love their good fortune or whatever you call it accumulating all these great prospects, and they haven't been very willing to move them. But they're in a position now where they really have to. I think, and it's not just making sure or dotting the I's and crossing the T's. They have real weaknesses, in the rotation thanks to injuries. They need to do it. They need to add at least one pitcher, probably two. And same goes for the bullpen. So maybe 3 or 4.
And then you get to put it delicately, you get a shit or get off the pot situation with these prospects, and that you hold on to them, and their value starts to go as they get older. Their value starts to go down. Last year they included Joey Ortiz in that trade to get Burns, and it basically was. It's almost like they were. I mean, he's a nice player. It was almost like it's like, okay, Joey's 25 and he needs to play in the big leagues. We need to find a home for him, and they did, and he's playing, and he's a good player. They got a good player back. You can't just hoard all these guys forever. They start to, prospects have value in 2 ways: playing for you or being traded for players you need. The Orioles clearly are in the traded for players you need portion of the game, and you've got to trade some of them.
It's not exactly the same thing, but the Twins are in a situation where they're, and who knows what the ownership will allow them financially, but they've got players and a player, Edward Julian, who came up last year and was really good, and I guess he's still, I don't think he's a prospect anymore, but he's a young enough player. But he struggled this year, and they had to bring him back. He was doing better at AAA, but he wasn't killing the ball. But they had to bring him back because of a spate of injuries right before the All-Star break. And he's come back, and he strikes out twice for every at bat. I mean, it's just terrible. Now, that was the guy before. If you had him in the minors doing well, to your point, that's a guy you could move for somebody. I don't know, Eric Fetty, or maybe not that good, but somebody like that. And now, he's exposing himself, not in a Reese McGuire sense, but in a sense that, maybe this guy can't hack it other than swinging and missing kind of hacking. So it's, and it can happen fast, perception of what players are worth. And I don't think the Twins can be, it's a circumstance that made them call him back up, but that might hurt them at the deadline. They might not be able to move him for much.
I would propose I think Edward could make a trade himself that would help, and that would be to trade the U and the O for a W. And
you're going to get the French people all mad at you.
And be Edward. I think Edward would hit better than Eduard.
Word, Holmes.
Yeah. We'll see how that works out. So there was discussion on one of the Athletic podcasts about teams being very unwilling to trade top prospects. They're deathly afraid of that. And apparently there's an article on there where they wrote up like the trades over the last 10 years that actually included them. It's very rare, but the only one that included the number one overall prospect, according to most rankings, was traded a few years ago when the Red Sox traded Yoan Moncada, and that deal had more in it. That also had Michael Kopech. For Chris Sale. And the people on the podcast and I found it amusing that that example is actually a great example of selling at the highest possible point ever on a prospect and having it actually work out. Where Sale came to the Red Sox, was great for them. They won a World Series that year. He ended up closing it out. And then he was really good for them for years after that. And the reason that it came up on that podcast was the thing people are talking about is the Tigers are, at least the rumors keep persisting, doesn't mean they're true, that they're open to trading Tarik Skubal. And they were like, well, that guy's really good. He might be the best pitcher in baseball right now, or he's certainly amongst that. What would it take to get him? And the thought was, well, if you were the Orioles, he's a guy who's got 2 more. You get him for 3 years if you trade for him. Would you be willing to trade Jackson Holliday for him? And your immediate thing is, no, you wouldn't do that. But then you start to think about it. You're like, well, maybe you would.
I even look at going back to the sale. I even look at that as, I mean, certainly it's not working out for the White Sox, but I would not. I don't criticize them for that. I mean, I didn't at the time.
Yeah.
It seemed like it was that deal should have worked.
Yeah.
It should have worked out for them too. But Moncada has has some COVID issues. I don't know if he's ever gotten over them. They said that he had long COVID when he got COVID in 2020. Kopech he's just kind of I don't know, nuclear Lucius. I blame, if I blame anybody, I blame the White Sox for not developing them. I'm not saying like I would do that deal again, but I wouldn't be afraid. I mean, that's the kind of deal that should work. If you're going to trade a guy like Sale, you should not be afraid to get prospects like that.
Yeah.
If you can't develop them, or they just don't work out, or there's bad luck, whatever. But that shows that deal can kind of work for both teams. And the White Sox haven't had to. They haven't been contending. They haven't had to pay Chris Sale, so you can't say that it didn't entirely not work out for him. I think that's a good example of a trade on both sides where you go, if the Tigers really want to reset a little bit, I don't know if the parting with Holiday is tough. I think parting with Holiday would be harder now, especially in the climate. And I would say Holiday is a better prospect than Moncada or Crochet by a lot. So I don't know if that's the deal, but maybe Kobe hold the Mayo,
right,
and Connor Furby Norby and Samuel Basallo. Maybe two of those guys and another guy from lower in the system, and maybe you have a deal.
Yeah, and that's where the Orioles' very top-heavy system works to their advantage, where most teams, if you're talking about, you've got a great player and you're talking to a team about trading him there's probably one top prospect that you're fighting on. You guys are going back and forth on. The Orioles are like, well, what about this? And then there's like three other guys that are not as good as Jackson, but pretty close. The funny thing about this isn't even a rumored deal. This is like a concept. And then the Sale Moncada deal is the big concern would have been with the team acquiring the pitcher. It's like, what if he gets hurt? But it worked opposite for the White Sox, in which the position player, Moncada, failed not because he wasn't talented. He failed because he's been chronically injured and then maybe chronically ill. And it wasn't even most likely a failure of scouting. It's not like he turned out they got him like, holy God, this guy sucks. He was really good for them when they first got him. They were right.
When he's right, you see he's a great defensive player and a strong hitter. Yeah.
So they were right, and then it didn't work out for other reasons.
Right.
And it was just funny that was used as that's why you can't trade your top prospect. It's like, well, no, that's the opposite. That shows that you probably could. But if you're the Tigers, what is I guess getting a pitcher like Skubal is like the hardest thing you can do, and they have him under control, and they're getting better. Why would now be the time to try to cash him in for something else?
I think it's possible that there is not a wrong answer to that question, and it's just kind of a matter of degrees. I think you could say that they've kind of been rebuilding here for a number of years, and they're closer. They're mediocre right now. Maybe another offseason, a successful offseason, gets them into where the Royals are, or the Twins, or the Guardian. It's not like it's a huge mountain to climb.
Right.
But the downsides with Skubal is, and where the comparison with Sale doesn't quite add up, is Sale had multiple Cy Young caliber seasons before the White Sox traded him. Skubal's never pitched more than 150 innings,
right,
because of injuries. Now it seems like he had kind of the injury scare a couple years ago with his flexor tendon, I think it was. I'm not sure if that was it or not, but it was a forearm deal, and he's been healthy ever since. But he hasn't done what Sale did before 2018, so it's not a perfect analogy in that. So, but with that, if you're the Tigers, you wonder, well, like you said, with Justin Steele, he's a pitcher. Should we not
Mm-hmm.
make something of him while we have a chance. And his value won't ever be higher than it is right now.
Yeah.
But if you believe in the rest of your organization and being able to get better, you can build around Skubal too, but not Scooby Doo.
Yeah, Sale in the 4 full years. Well, no, he was 5 full years. He'd been a reliever, but he became a starter in 12, and he finished. He was an all-star for his next 5 seasons in a row with the White Sox, and he finished 6th in the Cy Young voting, 5th in the Cy Young voting, 3rd in the Cy Young voting, 4th in the Cy Young voting, and 5th in those 5 years before he got traded to the Red Sox.
Right. And
he was not a deadline trade; he was an off-season trade. So it's funny, in my mind, I was thinking, well, what did he do for the rest of that year with the Red Sox? Well, nothing, because it was a full season.
Right.
And he was terrible for them. He only went 17-8 and led the league in innings pitched and strikeouts. And he finished 2nd in the Cy Young and, pitched his ass off in the playoffs. And, and Skubal he does not have the track record. He's been very good when healthy, but he hasn't been healthy. And that would obviously be the big scary thing. Sale, the injury concern was always there because of what his elbow looked like every time he threw the ball.
He's so skinny.
You could literally see the ligaments like moving as he was throwing. It just felt like every pitch his arm was going to break off. But the other thing Skubal has not shown that he could do that we know Sale can is we have not seen him run through the clubhouse and cut up uniforms. So maybe that's an intangible that maybe there's still time before the deadline. He's got 5 days. He'll ruin some uniforms.
The only thing fashionable about Skubal I've noticed is when he pitches on the road, his shoes are gray and his uniform is gray. He's like gray from top to bottom. I sort of wish the Tigers had that gray cap that they had a few years ago. That he'd be totally gray. But that's the closest thing to fashion that I can think of with Tarik Skubal.
But if they got Jackson Holliday, I don't know where they would play him because shortstop is in good hands with Javi. Javi hitting 176 with a 236 slugging for the Tigers this year.
It's not that low, is it?
Yeah, it's that low.
Cubs reunion? What about that?
I would take him back tomorrow.
Right.
I'd put him at third base just to watch you play defense there. Oleg and I have waxed nostalgic about how the part of the John Lester bunt proofing of the defense was to put Javi at third and Brian out in left in games when Lester pitched. And then when teams would square around a bunt, they would look up and Anthony Rizzo was standing about 4 feet away from them at first, and Javi was about 6 feet away at third. And you couldn't hit and if you swung away, you couldn't hit the ball past either one of them somehow. Javi has a jacked up back this year to put him on the injured list for quite a bit. But he's just been terrible since he got to Detroit. I think I felt like that was the worst possible, other than the cash, which was fine. Yeah. That was the worst possible situation for him. He was going to a team that was not contending for anything at the time in a cavernous ballpark that was only going to bring out the worst in Javi's impulses, which
I can hit it harder and get
right.
It over
I just need to hit the ball even harder every time. Because I feel like he's the kind of player who, he loved big moments and the crowd being excited, and Javi got better.
Yeah.
And there weren't any in Detroit for
Not
the
really,
first
no.
2.5 years he's been there. And it was just miserable. He's still only 31.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a chance that, if I were the Cubs and the Tigers wanted to eat a nice big chunk of that, maybe they would. Maybe they would like Jameson Taillon. You could trade Skubal to the Orioles, and then we'll give you Taillon, and he'll replace Skubal, and you just give us Javi and
a briefcase.
Throw in somebody good, and then we'll be all set.
Well, Javi has not been the same since he lost his diamond stud earring.
Yeah, no, that's almost
the celebration
exactly
at City Field.
Right. That was almost exactly the beginning of the end.
Not been the same since then. And as far as I know, he never found it. So I don't know.
That
ended up in a mulch pile or what?
His whole short stint with the Mets was very interesting. He got there and he was bad. He hadn't been very good for the Cubs that year, and he got there and he was bad. And then the Mets did that weird boo the fans themselves thing.
Yeah.
And they got a bunch of shit for it. And Javi and Lindor immediately took off.
Right.
And if you look at Javi's numbers for his 47 games with the Mets, he hit 299 with a 371 on base and a 515 slugging for them. They should have just kept him and played him at second base. But they didn't. Of course, it cost $1 billion to keep him.
Well, then they tried to get Carlos Correa. And they wouldn't have put him at short either. They'd have put him at third, probably.
Yeah. That's right. That was the Steve Cohen basically calling up and saying, if the Giants failed you, that's ridiculous. We'll just sign you a contract. And then they did. And then the doctors looked at him and went to Steve, no, we can't do this. Okay, sorry, you got to go. We can't do it. There's a couple of big name teams not playing particularly well right now. The Yankees have been pretty bad. 9-22, I think, in their last 31 games, something like that.
Still only a game and a half out of first somehow.
Yeah. And the Dodgers, which makes more sense because everybody's hurt, have also been struggling a little bit. Everybody expects both of them to do something. The Dodgers are going to get Clayton Kershaw back soon.
Today, maybe.
The last we saw of him, though, is that going to help?
Yeah.
He was throwing batting practice to the Padres in a playoff game, the last we saw Clayton.
I mean, are you asking me for real? I think he'll, he's activated today. So that would be Thursday. I don't think anybody should expect, vintage Kershaw.
Yeah.
And maybe not even expect it, at the end of the season, even though it's a half season after his back is put to hell here down the stretch. But maybe in between there, he'll do a little better than Paxton.
Yeah.
And
I think you and I could have done better than Jay.
8-2 record if you look at records.
He's 36, but his age 34 and age 35 seasons, he's 12-3 with a 228 and 13-5 with a 246. So yeah, the funny thing about Kershaw is I don't think I'm alone in this, but intellectually, I know he's one of the best pitchers of all time. I just know that. If you don't prompt me and you had me start to list the best pitchers of all time, it takes me a long time to think of him. Only because there's the weird West Coast bias where we only see him, you really don't see those teams. You don't see those individual players play as much. And then when we did in the playoffs, he's bad.
Right.
So I don't, you look at his numbers, they're ridiculous. He's an easy first ballot Hall of Famer. But probably certainly one of the 10 best pitchers of all time. Well, maybe not. There's a lot of good ones, but he's on the list at the very top of the list.
Well, when you look at,
it always takes me a while to even think of him when I'm doing that.
4.49 career ERA in the playoffs.
Yeah.
194 innings. 30 home runs. That's, as I recall, that's been his bugaboo. His others, he did have a moment there where 2017, I think.
Yeah.
Where it seemed like he got rid of that record.
I enjoyed his performance in Game 6 of the NLCS in 2016.
Yes.
I thought he came through in the clutch very well for the Cubs. Yeah, but it would also be weird things like it was Matt Adams, right?
Yeah.
Kershaw hadn't given up a home run to a left-handed batter all year.
Right.
And he gives one up to Matt Adams, and it cost them they literally lose their first round playoff series to the Cardinals on that pitch. But I always thought people would talk about how Greg Maddux didn't pitch that great in the postseason either. But the difference between Greg Maddux's playoff ERA was 3.27, and his big league ERA or his regular season ERA was 3.16.
Right.
The difference between Kershaw's is 248 regular season, and it almost doubles.
Right.
That's the definition of a guy not pitching as well in the playoffs, more than poor little Greggy. But I have an irrational love of Greg Maddux, so I will defend him for anything. There is a trade that seems very obvious for the Dodgers and seems Like it should be relatively easy to pull off considering it's who it's with. What do you think? What would you put the odds at Randy Arozarena playing for the Dodgers this year at?
I was calling for the Twins to bring him in. It wouldn't be like an absolute. Other teams would need him more, but he seems like among the non-pitchers, Arozarena would be the guy that I'd be going for absolutely if I were any of these teams with means. Just because he's not having his best season, but he did like a swing change or so. I don't know why he did that, but he did a swing change in the off season, and it's kind of taken him all this time to get right. But that's a guy who's just ridiculous in the playoffs,
yep.
And I suppose that could be luck that runs out, but that's the guy who I would add. The Dodgers they don't have the name. They're not quite as good as the Orioles. I can't really name you a lot of the Dodgers prospects. I don't know them that well. They're not on the tip of my brain, but they do have, from 1 to 30, they're one of the 5 best organizations. So you'd think that would work if the Rays are, but the Rays also they're going to want to compete next year. That's the thing about some of these other trades that I wonder if it makes sense for teams that aren't. How much do you want to rebuild? How many backward steps do you want to take?
Yeah.
And the Rays couldn't compete next year. I mean, I think they could. And it's not, Randy's not about to be a free agent, I don't think. So, but I mean, that's certainly what the Dodgers need.
Yeah.
Somebody like that.
Yeah, and it feels like from just watching him in the playoffs that he relishes those moments. He plays well in those moments. He seems like he's an easy fit in your clubhouse. That's not always the case. And since June 1st this year, he's even better than Ian Happ. 290, 402, 517 with a 920 OPS, 7 homers, 17 RBIs. So his OPS is 920. Happ's only 907 since then. That's only going to frustrate me more, knowing that Randy has a lot of value and Happ is basically having the same. Could have a similar impact, although much duller.
Did the Cubs think they just weren't going to re-sign him if they didn't give him a no trade clause? That seems to be another. He wouldn't take the deal unless.
Yeah, I always assumed that it was the trade-off was he wanted a 4-year deal. They only want to give him a 3-year deal, so they gave him a no trade. So even though it's only a 3-year deal, he'd know he was going to be there all 3 years. The odd thing about that whole thing was the Cubs acted as though Happ had a lot of leverage, and He really didn't. He had been terrible in 21, awful. He was pretty good in 22. And then he was a free agent, and everybody said, well, he's going to play out the 23 season. He's going to leave. And I feel like a lot of it was Jed getting tired of taking shit for not re-signing anybody.
Right.
And I always thought, of course, the one guy they're going to keep is going to be Ian Happ, not all those guys. And then, you get people be like, well, he's actually overperformed that contract because, he's like a 4-win player and $8 million per WAR. He should be a $32 million player. My counter to that would be if he'd hit the market after last year, who would have given him $20 million? Nobody.
Right.
So I don't give a shit if you given the current market, you're going to have to recalibrate how many million you think a point of WAR is worth. Given that owners don't want to pay for guys anymore and they strangle the value down. So I don't know. We talked about Randy being a guy who an easy fit in every clubhouse. It's funny that and I don't know if there's a huge trade market for him or Jim Bowden just talks about him all the time because he loves him. But the Marlins are shopping Jazz Chisholm. And there was a thought that maybe he would fit with the Yankees. And then there was concern. Oh no, he's too flashy for New York.
Right. That notably conservative enclave.
Yes.
I think he has. There have been a couple of I don't know too many details, but there have been a couple of stories about how maybe he ruffled Skip Schumacher's feathers or got into an argument with another player about, and I don't know who that was. The Marlins are that's such a weird environment anyway.
Yep.
I think that the bigger, and you hinted at this earlier, I think the bigger issue is, him staying healthy and being good enough to make an impact. And is that a fit in, with the Yankees roster the way it is? I don't know. With Judge and Soto out there. I don't know. Do you put him back in the infield? He came up as a shortstop. So
yeah, the Marlins have been playing him some innings at second.
Yeah.
In anticipation of upping his trade value. He's he missed big hunks of 22 and 23 with injury. He only played 60 games in 22 and 97 last year. He's played 99 this year. And he's fine. He's a 250 hitter. He doesn't get on as much as you'd like for a guy who's that fast. He's 324 on base. He does have 13 homers, so that gives you something. He has led the league in one category in his career. He got caught stealing in 2021. And he's got 8 this year, which has to be among the league leaders. But yeah, it's an odd fit for the Yankees. He probably would have to play second base for them, right? Because
yes, with Verdugo and
Verdugo, Judge, and Soto in the outfield. Unless
and then the great Trent Grisham.
Yeah.
As a number 4. Yeah.
Trent has quite the mustache. Have you seen Trent's mustache?
I saw
it's very Ned
meme.
Flandersy.
I saw a meme of him though with sunglasses and a mustache, and he looked like the one of the Super Troopers. That's one Super Trooper dude, and so the meme was, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" So it was he looked like some kind of authoritarian guy. I think he's much more laid back than that, but in reality. But he does the mustache and the glasses. It's not really a Bobby Valentine goofy, but it is a goofy Super Trooper kind of a face.
It is funny. Jazz's Baseball Reference has a headshot. You can't see what team he plays for because he's wearing his hat with the bill almost straight up.
Right.
I could see the Yankees getting close to doing the trade, looking at that picture and going, "No, sorry, can't do that."
Right. That's almost as bad as letting Ken Griffey on the field.
Yeah, there's just a lot of Jazz. You going to shave those sideburns? What? What are you talking about?
Shave what? MF?
I said he's played some games at second base. It might be one. So that's
that's
quite the showcase.
That's proves he can do it, doesn't it?
He 2 starts at second base, 22 innings. He made 11 errors. No, he didn't make any.
Well, but that's how he came up. So
yeah, right.
Yeah,
it was like a big deal when they moved him to the outfield.
Right.
I remember that.
And he showed himself to be capable of some circus catches. So his athleticism. The numbers aren't, great as far as his defensive metrics, but he'll make a diving play for you. Well, but like you said, they don't need him out there.
No, he's Bahamian, and I just like to say Bahamian.
Just as long as he behaves himself, that's all that the Yankees want.
Do you know what his
lower that hat and?
Do you know what his real name is? You'd be shocked. It's not Jazz.
Edgar.
It is just Rondo Hermes Arrington.
Right.
Chisholm. If I were him, I would try to put that whole thing with the little letters on the uniforms this year. I think they could fit it. I would want
that could be Hermes, like the character from Futurama. I don't know if it's the same.
Yeah, I only said Hermes because wouldn't Hermes be yes?
Yes. I mean,
but who knows?
Not Spanish.
People can spell things the way they want to spell them. That's fine.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary. and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
That's right. Doggone it.
So
represented by Rock Nation. So that means Jay-Z would have to get in the negotiating room with Randy Levine.
I was watching the Hard Knocks off-season one with the Giants last night, and they were getting up to. It's the slowest build up to draft night ever. 4 episodes in, and we're finally the draft is next week. But there's been a lot of which Mara owns them now? Wellington's kid. I can't think. Anyway, there's a lot of. Yeah, I guess it is Tim.
Tim was grandpa.
Tim. Yeah. And a lot of shots of him very slowly walking into the general manager, Joe Shane's office, to the point where it looks like they just play the same clip over and over again. That's always him from behind, slowly walking in. But last night they showed them getting into the draft room, and Steve Tisch, who was the other co-owner, had to throw some money in for the Maras.
Yeah.
Looking just about as rumpled as you. Everybody's in suits. Everybody's looking good. And Steve rolls in with a parka on and a half unbuttoned white dress shirt. And he's just kind of laying there kind of oozing into his chair. Yes, I'm rich. I can look like this if I want. So him and Jay-Z negotiating would be fun. I had another Cub thought, because that's what I do. I think about the Cubs. And that was, if you're the Cubs and you look at how kind of landlocked your roster is and you're trying to fix things, you have a lot of kind of meh offense at key spots.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder, how much trade value would Nico Hoerner have? If you traded Nico to a good team with a good offense, then all of a sudden he's much more valuable because he's a league average offensive player who plays great defense at second base. And second base defense is actually important, more important than it used to be, because when they took the shifts away, a lot more is asked of a second baseman than had been for it. It used to be you could park, Jeff Kent and what's his name? The homophobe that killed the Cubs and then played for the Cubs. Why can't I think of his name? But you can't do that anymore. And I kind of wonder if he's got more value on a better team.
Trade him to Dodgers. They need a shortstop.
Yeah.
I mean, Mookie.
I thought that same thing. That maybe the trade you make is that Nico goes back and he plays shortstop for somebody where he's even more valuable. Because that league average offense at short all of a sudden is even more attractive than
Does
it would
Dansby
be.
have a no trade?
Oh, of course. Yes.
I tried.
Full no trade for 7 years. Yeah. That contract is already bad. They got 2 good months out of it. Oh, to go back to April and May of 2023, when it looked like Jed got it right. And ever since then, very clear he did not.
Rhymes with Jeff Blauser. That's not fair, but maybe.
It's not fair to Jeff Blauser. Hey, Blauser only had a 3-year deal, I think.
Yeah.
That's 7. There was a time last year when Dansby, when he first got hurt and was still trying to play through it, his offense cratered. There was a time last year, because we looked it up, where Blauser was hitting better at that point of his first season than Dansby.
Right.
I was like, God, he's not even as good as Jeff Blauser. That was a case of we all saw it coming, right? There were 4 hotshots shortstops in that class, and the Cubs needed a shortstop. Well, you knew they were going to shop for number 4.
Right.
It was going to be the cheapest. It was going to be the shortest and the least amount of risk. He also was going to be the least talented player. And for a while, it looked like the Cubs did a great job. He had gotten off to terrible starts in Atlanta every year.
Yeah.
And I even was warning people, he's going to get off to a bad start. So we can't freak out. We got off to a good start, which maybe was a bad sign.
Right.
And Trey Turner was playing terribly for the Phillies. and Correa was hurt, and Xander was clearly showing that he should probably be playing second base. And you're like, well, Jed made the smart move. And now we look a year later, and Trey is one of the best players in baseball again. And Correa has been mostly healthy and has had a good year. He's always going to find ways to hurt himself a little bit. And Xander's at second base and has been hurt and hasn't put up really good numbers. But then, and Dansby's been bad. And it's like, we kind of saw this coming.
Yeah, Dansby definitely has one of those ceiling floors that's like the same, kind of like in Being John Malkovich, that one scene where crawling around and it's a crawl space all of a sudden. It's not a lot of wiggle room.
I mean, I think that it's sad, but I think the best you can hope for now for the next 5 years with Dansby is that he gets back to becomes kind of like basically a league average offensive player who plays good defense.
Great on defense, yeah, right.
But even the defense, he's 30 now.
Right.
So that's inevitably going to go, he'll always have good hands and he throws well, but what he gets to will inevitably go down. But that's fine. He's got Christopher Morel next to him to make up for it and take the load off.
I'm laughing at your realization.
Yeah.
It's just in real time. It's funny.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be David Shaw someday, won't it?
Matt. David Shaw is the old, maybe the Stanford football coach could come.
Sorry. Yeah.
I'd try him for a few innings the third, maybe.
Right.
He had some athleticism when he played. I think. I don't remember.
I would imagine that he did.
Yeah. The Cubs basically kicked whatever last dirt wasn't on them over the homestand. They lost a series of the Diamondbacks again. Just a reminder of what happened to them last year, and then they lost a series to the Brewers. So fine, they're done with the Brewers for the year now. And then next weekend they play the Cardinals, and then they're done with the Cardinals. It's quite a season, quite a schedule MLB has. But they got a lot of Paul Skeens coming up, I think, so that'll help. They can get no hit at least a couple of times. It'd be fun for everybody.
It probably will, but then they'll pull him in the 7th.
Yeah, the Cubs are even like, we don't need to hit this guy. Don't worry about it. They're gonna have to take him out. We'll get all our hits off the bullpen. Save your hits, guys. Well, we are, even if we're not trying. I did think though, Skeens, I thought it was really cool that Major League Baseball started him, that the National League started him in the All-Star game. One of the few times when baseball was like, it would be cool. Let's do that. They just seem immune to that. But I knew he would pitch well because his nemesis was not in the American League lineup. The one guy he can't get out is Cub legend Miles Mastrobuoni, who was not playing for the American League All-Stars or the National League All-Stars or the AAA All-Stars or anybody. But if you need a hit, you need a big hit. That's the Cubs should shop Mastrobuoni to teams who might be battling the Pirates for a wild card spot and go, we've got the guy who Paul Skeens can't get out, Miles Mastrobuoni.
I'd love for them to trade him to whatever team has Reese McGuire.
That apparently didn't Reese. Is he still a Red Sox?
Yeah.
Wasn't there there was a skirmish last night in the Rockies-Red Sox game?
Rockies were taking him to the woodshed.
And one of them made fun.
Cal Quantrill, you bleeping, you jerked off in a Dollar Tree parking lot. So I did see one commenter say, no, it's okay that he made fun of him for that because it was a sex crime. I mean, I guess it could be if you're doing it where people can see.
Yeah, I was going to say, who was the victim in this?
But I don't know that I think he was fined like $500. So I don't know if it's capital sex crime. I don't know about that.
Why does it never work out where that would have been great if that had been a Sunday night game and David Cohn had to comment on
explain himself?
Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if Carl Ravitch suddenly grew a personality and went?
Coney, you've been there.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't in the bullpen, but you want to talk about your history with this? What?
Hey, Carl.
The Milwaukee Brewers, who just won 2 of 3 against the Cubs, and it's easy to beat the Cubs when you only have to score twice to win all the games. Are most likely, maybe it's official by now, I didn't look today, going to lose Christian Yelich for the remainder of the season. He needs back surgery. His back injury has bothered him for
more than basically a week back.
Basically, yeah, more than he got his week back, more than a week back. Maybe it has something to do with it. When he broke his kneecap, did he also screw up his back? Because he basically just stopped hitting altogether when that happened. But
yeah, I don't know. But something happened to him for sure. It's always been hanging over him.
That and the little lights that they used to turn on the scoreboard for him up in Old Miller Park to let him know a fastball was coming. That didn't hurt either. But not that I'm a bitter Cub fan and conspiracy theorist, but we all know that really happened. So if you're the Brewers now, you're going to win the Central, barring an epic collapse, because it's hard to collapse when none of the teams behind you can do anything.
What if the Pirates Pirates? No.
Well, it's interesting to see if the Pirates were run like a real baseball team.
Right.
Like they would be very active at the deadline, get some offense, and that's a team you would not want to play in the playoffs.
Right.
I mean, you don't want to get Skeens, Jones, and Keller in that first 3-game series. You're kind of screwed.
Right.
But I don't know. They seem to be like, this is how cute we're contending.
Yeah.
Let's keep the payroll at $48 million. Because they are, they're in third in the Central. They're only a game. They're only a game behind the Cardinals,
right?
Who aren't good. That's another.
They're 1 game back in the wild card.
Yeah. Yeah, the Pirates are legitimately in this thing. In fact, given the fact that they have maybe the best pitcher in the National League, and Jones might be one of the 4 or 5 best pitchers in the National League, they should be able to get into the playoffs. But they don't hit, and they don't seem to want to address that because that might cost some money. Although Marquee Sports Network would be very down on them because their run differential is -6.
They did get some potentially, or they're getting, I should say, they haven't gotten it yet, but the union has kind of massaged the distribution of TV luxury tax dollars to the Athletic reports to the some of the teams might get as much as like $15 million. To spend.
Right. And I guarantee you, Bob Nutting has his pocket open and is ready to cram it right in there.
He does. They're just, if the Pirates suddenly became interested, there's, $10 or $15 million now available to them to get an outfield. For example.
I can see it happen. Not that they would do. Major League Baseball mails them the check for $15 million. Ben Cherington has it in his hands, and Bob walks by and goes, "Ooh, Ben, can I just look at that check for a second?" Takes it, folds it in half, puts it in his pocket, and walks right out the front door with it. Ben's like just holding his hands where the check was, staring at them like, "Where did that go?" Our billionaire owner needed $15 million more for something. I mean, that is the problem. The Reds, similarly cheap.
Castellini's.
What are you gonna do? Go root for another team? Still the greatest opening day speech of all time.
Finally, I mean, they say what everybody's thinking.
Came right out and said it. For anyone out there who doesn't remember what happened, it's 2 years ago or 3 years ago. He's literally being interviewed on the field by the TV sideline reporter. It's usually it's the owner, or I guess in this case the son of the owner, but the guy who's really supposedly running things. Going to talk about what a great season that's coming up, and the guy's like, "Well, what do you say to criticism that you didn't do enough to improve the team?" And he's like, "What are the fans going to do? Go root for somebody else?"
Wow, great sport we love.
Yeah. Good job. But the Reds have announced they're willing to trade off pieces that aren't guaranteed to be back next year. So come on over, take a look at our roster, and everybody's like, "Ugh, no." Those guys are the reason you're in fifth or fourth, because the Cubs are in fifth.
Right.
But not a lot there. Anyway, the Brewers thing. I wonder, they're also run similarly cheaply by a billionaire. This whole idea, well, it's a small market. They just don't have. Mark Antanasio doesn't spend that money because he doesn't want to. Actually, he doesn't have it. But what are the odds they would go out now and be like, look, this team's actually pretty good, and we just lost our best offensive player. It's before the trade deadline. We could go get somebody. What are the odds that they would do anything other than tell Pat Murphy, go get him?
Yeah, I mean, they haven't been. They certainly are. They're kind of in it's kind of like a junior Orioles position because they have lots of good. They have like an excessive amount of decent outfield prospects.
Yeah.
So they have some depth that they could trade. You know, they can't, even with Yelich has been DHing anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think because the back had been
right.
Yeah.
So I mean, they could take one of, if you don't want to trade Blake Perkins, then pick another guy, and get some real reinforcements for this season. So I think, I don't believe in any hope necessarily for like Nutting or people like that, but I have hope that your average team that would benefit by some deadline deals and has the means would make. And again, the Brewers are another team where that extra luxury tax money might go to.
And I do think the Brewers operate on a slightly higher level of aspiration than, I mean, the Pirates and Reds over the last few years have been a stark example of owners basically not caring whether their team wins or not.
Right.
And the Brewers have never really been that. They have self-imposed, the Cubs do it at a higher level. They have a self-imposed limit that they're willing to spend. And the general manager knows that, and he has to spend to that level, and it does limit what they're able to do.
Right.
I mean, I would think if they were realistic about it, I would think if I were them, I would feel like getting to the playoffs is probably, whether we add a guy or not, we're probably not around for week 2 of the playoffs.
Yeah,
of the playoffs.
That's true, and that goes back to that whole thing about what all the teams need to think they need to do to get in the playoffs. Well, that threshold has been lowered because too many teams make the playoffs. It just doesn't take a lot to get there. And between the Brewers being okay and the rest of the division being so dysfunctional or just not giving a crap, it would take more injuries, not just Yelich, for them to fall out of it. So maybe you're right, but they still have more outfielders than they need, who are like all the same dude, Sal Frelick and Perkins, and they have lots of guys who are clones.
Yes. Yeah, the NL wildcard, especially if you look at it, is
embarrassing.
The very injured Braves are the number 1 wildcard team, and then it's the Mets, who are paying more for players to play on other teams than their own, and then the Cardinals, who really aren't very good. They're not to go all run differential on you, but of the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams in the National League, they're the only ones with a negative. And it's minus 36. Their expected win-loss is 47-55. The Cubs' expected win-loss is 51-53. And then even the teams chasing them, I think everybody just kind of takes for granted that the Padres will make some trade because that's what AJ Preller does. Whether it works or not, AJ can't let the deadline go without something splashy.
And the Braves, maybe not splashy, considering who's hurt, the Acuna and Strider from way back and all that, but they'll plug their holes, so they'll be active.
Yeah. The Diamondbacks are sitting there only a half game out of the last wild card spot. I mean, I would, who knows, post World Series hangover or whatever, but it just feels like that's a team that should be able to get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
And then the Pirates, and then the Reds, and then the Giants. And the Giants are, nobody knows what the hell they're doing. They, Robbie Ray came back. He pitched 5 innings last night and didn't give up a hit. But he didn't give up a run. He didn't give up a hit. He threw the ball all over the park in the first inning.
His only start, do you think, for the Giants this year? Maybe.
Are they going to trade him, or do you think his elbow already fell off?
Maybe. Maybe to both.
That would be funny. The showcase start.
Right. Back to the Mariners.
And then it's all weird. Having the Guardians with the best record in the American League is astonishing to me.
I can't figure it. I don't think it'll last, but it's funny.
Yeah, they feel like a team that gets in with a nice big record and loses the first 2 games, and their season's over. Although they'll get a bye if they go in with the best record.
I don't think they will. I think
so they'd have to lose 3
Orioles
games.
Will. They'll come back to earth, and the Orioles will overtake. I still think the Twins will win the Central, but they like to dog paddle. So
what is it? 4.5 games?
Yeah. Twins are losing today, though, or the Guards are losing today, so it'll be, that's 5, maybe. So it'll be 4.5 if the Guardians lose today. The Twins do not play.
The fight for the wild card in the American League, and maybe I only think, this is going to be fun because I don't watch the teams as much, and so I don't see as many of their flaws as the National League ones.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got the Royals, who are right now tucked into that last spot, and they get the Cubs for the weekend, so there's 3 wins. And then the Red Sox and the Mariners, and then the Rays, who are there but most likely selling this year.
Right.
What do you think the Royals, are they looking to, do they have a big deficiency they're looking to fill, or are they just happy to be relevant
offense,
again? Yeah.
The bullpen has been sloppy. They just added Hunter Harvey. The problem with the Royals is, and you saw it, well, you didn't, but I mean the Royal you, so to speak, saw that they traded their number 2 prospect and a compensation pick for Hunter Harvey. I mean, that's kind of a lot, but their number 2 prospect is, it's not like the Orioles' number 2 prospect. They have a very weak farm system. So I don't know if they have the means. What they might be able to do is, they need at least 2 bats in the lineup every day. So they might be able to take on some salary because they haven't spent in years.
Yeah.
Since the World Series. One thing they could do. They could take somebody's older, expensive dude and put him in the lineup. Andrew Benintendi, maybe. Probably not. But how about a reunion? So, they need maybe someone to play third and someone to play left. And that.
Oh, well, I got it.
Yeah, right.
I got it set up for him. Well, yeah. Honestly, you're right. That would be a perfect Ian Happ destination.
That would work, except for some.
Maybe he's come up with some kind of barbecue coffee combo, and he'd be willing to go out there and.
We like weird T-shirts in Kansas City. So.
Oops, sorry. No, I was going to sell you on the idea of David Bodie and Patrick Wisdom to fill those 2 spots.
No, you weren't.
We made a huge deal with the Cubs. What? You got who? Yeah, I don't know if you noticed because nobody did. In fact, it's funny. He started to play really well and literally nobody noticed. The Cubs have had such terrible production out of their catchers that Thomas Nido was a step up when they got him. Right around the 4th of July, they benched Miguel Amaya, who's their primary catcher. And for a couple of days, nobody noticed because it's Miguel Amaya, and they completely changed his swing. They literally took away he had a high leg kick and they ditched it. And in the 9 games since he ditched this almost sounds made up. These are Miguel Amaya's stats. He is batting .524 with a .600 on base and a .714 slug for a .1314 OPS.
Good gravy.
And my question was, it took you until July to ditch the leg kick? And it worked immediately.
Sometimes it's hard to a serious answer is that they are afraid.
Yes.
They're afraid to change anything. Even when it's not, it's like, well, it's going to work out. We just got to stick with it. And a lot of times that's true. But
well, here was the slash line the day they benched him.
Yeah.
186.
Ooh.
249, 256.
It's a good on
hit
base
rock bottom.
I like that.
Yeah, that's right. He had hit rock bottom 2 months before they changed it. The risk of making him bad had so long ago passed.
Right.
Because I get the thing where, especially if you're going to make a major swing change to a player, that player, in order for that player to buy in, he most likely has to just be like, I have to try it. Nothing is working. Right. And then they'll buy into it and they'll actually do it. But he had been so bad for so long. This is a guy who hitting in the minors was never a problem for him. The only problem he had in the minors was staying healthy. Like he was a hotshot prospect. And his biggest limitation with the Cubs had been that over a 3-year span, he was only healthy enough to play like 62 games in the minor leagues. I mean, it was basically just lost season after lost season after lost season. And when he got healthy last year and he was playing, they had to promote him because Tucker Barnyard was their backup and was unplayable. And he's out of options. They could never send him back.
Right.
So when he struggled this year, they couldn't do the normal, sensible thing you do with a young catcher, which is just send him back to AAA, let him get some hits and get his confidence back. They just literally couldn't do it because they would lose him. But now he's a superstar. He's Adley Rutschman.
Right.
He's better than Adley Rutschman. Actually, maybe they could call the Orioles and say, how about Taillon and Amaya for Adley Rutschman and Jackson Holliday? And then when the Orioles said yes, then Jake could be like, well, maybe that's not enough. What else could you throw in to make that deal? Oh, well. So we got 5. Nothing has happened yet. There was talk that this would be an early active trade deadline. They always say that. Writers say that because they get bored of nothing happening.
Please.
So they start to convince themselves that, I think a lot's going to happen probably today. There might be 6 trades tonight. Really?
There's probably a trade just now. I got to go get it.
Well, when next we meet, we can talk about all the great things that actually happened.
Very good. I look forward to it.
All right. Well, thanks.
You're welcome.
Many of us have herpes.
No, I thought it generally sucked. I didn't think it was a specific suck. I thought it was like an all-encompassing type of suck. So, we're going to try and rectify that. But for right now, I'm going to be pretty pissed about it.
It's fitting. It's got to be done with one of the best games of all time. Just unbelievable. I mean, got to congratulate the Dolan family.
Sean, my podcast co-host Andy, you were his favorite player growing up.
Oh, thank you so much. Awesome.